So with trauma-informed pedagogy, I stumbled upon this field of study and this all these teaching techniques. And before I go on any further, if you hear other noises like a door, I have two Siamese cats and they really hate being locked out when I am working. So that's so if there are interruptions, it's them. So, with trauma informed pedagogy, the first thing I wanted to mention is emotional intelligence. When I started on this journey, it was a rather forced introduction for me because I ended up having a premature delivery of my child. And when she became a toddler, there was some very difficult behaviors. And I didn't understand what was going on. We did everything we could, read stuff, and nothing seemed to help, and it wasn't working. So I met with a child therapist who could get us in within the week, and that is a miracle. And she asked me this question: do you think emotional intelligence is caught? It's innate, or it's something you learn and can be taught. Well, I've always thought that it was innate. It was just something that you had, and maybe you could change some of it, but not really a majority of your emotional intelligence. Boy, was I wrong. So I had a long way to go in learning my own emotional intelligence and how to teach my child the same skills I'm learning. So we come to attachment theory, and I know you might not know a lot about attachment theory, but I would encourage you to do some research into it. There are some questionnaires you could do that will point you towards what your attachment style is, but the true attachment test really needs to be done by a psychologist or a counselor because they know how to do the assessment. So with attachment, it really shows us how we relate to people as adults, how we relate to our partners, how we relate to our colleagues, our children, and our students. So it's a very eye-opening exercise and sometimes a difficult exercise because we really get to see ourselves. There are a couple attachment styles, and I'll talk more about those as we go on to the slide. Um, and then here is the other style, your disciplinary style. How were you disciplined? How were you taught as a child? Was it authoritarian? That means I say it and you do it. There's no room for negotiation here. Military style boot camp, that is authoritarian. And we have permissive parenting, loosey goosey, everything goes, But I was looking for a happy medium. How can I, is there a happy medium? And there is, and I had to learn it. Growing up in an Asian culture, it leans more towards the authoritarian. And my husband is retired military, so he also leans towards the authoritarian. But when you're dealing with children that have early childhood trauma, authoritarian does not work. It just increases the amount of anxiety and it just melts down from there. Permissive discipline, or really the lack of discipline, also does not work for children that have trauma or anybody that has trauma because there are no boundaries. It also increases the insecurity and fear because we don't know what the yes is. And the other one is, wow, we don't know when you will say yes. So both yeses are not quite secure enough, but authoritative styles of behavior management, I even hate that word now, really shares the power and shares the control. And so the child or whoever you're working with gets to make a joint decision. And I think as we grow to become adults, that is what we do more and more, instead of just, I think you always negotiate with a boss. I think that is just a normal day-to-day interaction. It is the art of compromise and negotiation and talking through things. So it leads us to this next point, engagement versus dismissal. Um, I know a lot of books, even with dealing with misbehavior, say, oh, a timeout works. Well, if timeouts work, then why does solitary confinement not work in a prison? Um, there are some things to think about. The most shocking statistic that I came across while I was doing the research last year, just early last year, there is a school to prison pipeline. That means the disciplinary styles we're doing in school with detention, with suspensions, are actually not working. Statistically, they're actually graduating these students instead of to the world, they're graduating them to prison. So there is that pipeline, and I was rather shocked to hear that is going on, and it is a pervasive problem in the USA. So I come to this engagement. How do you engage a child or a student who is not really doing what you wish them to do? So what are possibilities to engage instead of dismiss? So why engagement? Why engagement? So if you are sad, all right, or mad about something, what do you do? Do you shut yourself in a room? And if you do, very likely um, you were dismissed many times when you had a negative emotion. So your response is to go straight to your own space and just let it pass. But does that really pass is another question. If it does, that's great. You've learned great self-regulation skills. You know how to handle it. But for most people, I'll suggest to you, it is really engagement. Look at how many posts on social media. Something happened to me today. The store assistant was rude. That is really seeking engagement, seeking someone to process that with empathy, someone to hear you out. That is really engagement. And that's what we seek as adults, validation and relationship. It's the same with our kids and our students, even the college kids, especially the college kids. So here is another concept that I had to change in my head. And this is a big one. This is a big paradigm shift. So, what is misbehavior and what is dysregulation? Two big words. So, my therapist said, what if you can see misbehavior as the brain not wanting to cooperate? It's a problem in the brain, and that is leading to certain actions. What if you can switch the way you think? So a student, for example, this is very common in the college teaching and high school, your student comes in. I used to teach class piano a lot. The student comes in, they have not practiced anything you have asked them to. It's just not done. So I can work on two assumptions. I can work on the assumption of misbehavior. That student is lazy. They're unmotivated. They're just plain lazy. They have horrible time management. I can go that way, which I used to. I'll be honest. Okay. But working in trauma-informed education switch the way I see it. And I would ask very different questions and have a very different set of assumptions. Yes, the student has a problem with time management, but I am not going to assume laziness. I am going to assume executive dysfunction. That means their brain got so overwhelmed when they opened the book or when they thought about going to the practice room to approach the piano, the fight, flight, freeze kicked in. So what do I do? So now I have to get their brain into the cognitive part so that they can think, They can scaffold, they can say, okay, I'm going to practice this first. I'll practice it this way with these steps, and then I'll go to the next practice. If today these don't get fixed, I'm going to do that tomorrow. That is really executive dysfunction. So I'm going to propose to you, it's not laziness, it's that fear of not being able to produce that stops us from trying from the beginning. So when you approach misbehavior in the studio like this, you open a conversation and you create a safe space. And guess what? You become the mentor again to pull them into regulation. So that's one example for us as teachers. So here it is, regulation versus punishment. So I talked about if you don't see it as misbehavior, then you're not going to go down the track of punishment. You're going to go down the track of regulation. How do I help the student look and manage time? So fear is a bully. You know, when a child is acting out of fear, and it's really hard to tell. It's pretty, even as a trained TBRI practitioner, it's hard to tell. And the closer the child is to you, if it's your own children, it's even harder to tell. So fear is a bully. And when you notice that fear is driving that behavior, you cannot punish fear or anger out of a child. You engage and you disarm. So that is a challenge. So trauma-informed pedagogy is not really a set of tools. Do ABC and you become a trauma-informed educator. It is actually a paradigm shift of how you see yourself first, and then how you move from there. So this slide are headlines. This was from December 2020. And if I were to pull up, you know, just last month's headlines, it would look very much the same or worse. So past trauma may haunt your future health. Invisible scars. PBS did a series on this. I watched some of it. I think I watched part 1 and part 2 of this. Childhood trauma impacts millions of Americans, and it's having devastating consequences. When I started my journey on this trauma-informed journey, it was 1 out of 4 school-age children have experienced significant trauma. Right now, last year, the number was 1 out of 3. And now, stretching into the 3rd year of the pandemic, I would suggest that it's higher. 1 out of 2, maybe every child has been touched by this collective trauma that we're going through at this point. I also put this small slide on the right side of your screen. These are 2 brain scans. One is a healthy developing brain. The other one is of a child that has significant trauma. So we are not medical professional. We probably will not have access to these machines or ask a parent, hey, can you go get an MRI of your child's brain? But so I call trauma the unseen disability. You don't see it because a lot of it is buried. The physical impact of trauma is buried in the brain, in the immune system, in the endocrine system. So a lot of it is buried. But what we see are the behaviors, very baffling behaviors. So I just would encourage you to kind of step out. You know, trauma is not a fun topic to go research, but really it holds a lot of keys to your own happiness and your own gratefulness journey. And I'm very thankful for what I have learned about trauma and about my own trauma history and how I can relate to people much better now. So what is trauma-informed pedagogy? So you understand the impact of traumatic stress on cognition and behavior. Remember that brain scan? So what we do as educators is we want to create a safe space. So it's both a physical safe space and an emotionally safe space. I cannot do the physical as well as I want in my studio just because of the space constraints. One of the things I'm very aware of as an instructor is where I sit and where I stand. Um, I really do not block an exit. I do not stand. I hate having my desk close to the exit. No, I want the student to be closest to the exit. So they can always say, I'm done, bye, I'm gonna walk out. I'm not going, they know I'm not in front of that door. And I will not stand in front of that door because they need that safe space. So emotional safe space, we can all create that. So some things to think about. How is your studio organized? Where are the entrances and exits? For me, as a person that is a recovering perfectionist and recovering anxious person, when I go to a restaurant by myself, I always face the exit. Always, unless I'm sitting with someone. One of my best friends is a military police officer. So if I'm having a meal with him, he sits facing the exit because I know he won't be able to do that, to not sit facing an exit. That's just the way they are trained. So we see the need behind the behavior. So I'll just give myself as the example. Why do I always want to see the exit? Because I want to know I can leave, that I'm not trapped in any situation. So the need is feeling safe, to feel safe. You might have students that bring a toy. I used to just hate it. Oh, just hate it. 5 years ago, I would have hated it. Do you have students that bring toys to their lessons? Like a stuffed animal. I have a student every week, he brings a different toy. Um, so his dad tried to take it away from him one time. It was like a stuffed animal of some sort, and he's 8 years old. So you say you're too old for a stuffed animal. I could say that. And there was a meltdown before he came out of the car because dad wanted him to put that toy down. And I hate intervening, but I just said the toy is okay. It's welcome in my studio. What is the need of that student? Why is it driving that behavior? He has a sensory need. He needs something in his hands all the time. So when he comes in, he puts the toy next to him on the piano bench. It sits next to him. And for the most part, it sits there. And so long as it's there, it's a security blanket for him. And that's okay. We as adults have a lot of our own security blankets too. Um, so I wanted to see you all at MTNA. I really did. Because if I were to do a live presentation with you, and I said, okay, to attend this presentation, you have to leave your cell phones with me. You know what? I'd walk out. I would walk out. I need my phone. I can turn it off. I can not look at it, but it needs to be with me because it's a part of me. My contacts are in there. It reminds me of my family, my friends, my cat. So there is a need of feeling safe and feeling attached to the people I love that is behind that behavior. With this empowerment, your voice matters. As a teacher, your students' voice matters, your colleagues' voices matter. During trauma, during the impact of trauma, the first area of the brain to shut down are the speech centers. So you've heard of court cases, especially with sexual assault. The victim did not say no, they didn't scream, they didn't, you know what? Research is telling us the speech center is the first one to shut down. The last one to shut down is hearing. So they might be able to recall everything they heard, but they can't tell you what they said and what they saw. So the hearing is the last one, and researchers believe it's the last sense to go before we, pass away from this earth. So with empowerment, we return the power of their speech to the student. So it rebuilds the sense of self-control and rebuilds the sense of being safe. I'm in control. My voice matters. When I say something, people listen to me. So those are very important points. So what does this do for us as teachers? It's a framework for healthy relationships. It's clear boundaries. It has helped me set better boundaries for my studio, for myself, for my billing. How you work. Do you give makeup lessons, and how do you handle the parent says, "Oh, I'm going on vacation next week. I just won't pay you for this lesson." How do you handle those questions, and are you secure enough to stand your ground? So strategies also for rupture and repair. Now, no relationship is perfect. No relationship, not even with your best students. There will be days where maybe you don't feel so good, and you say something you shouldn't. I have done that before. I have snapped at a student before, and you know what? And the student yelled back at me. That was good. But you know what? We both worked through that argument. He told me how he was feeling. I told him how I was feeling. And in the end, the both of us found a way to manage and reintegrate what we were feeling into something better. So we ended the lesson really well, even though it was really rough at one point. And so these give structure, and it gives you hope when there was like one rotten lesson like this. No, the student's going to come back. They have learned a lot from you. So it promotes resiliency and recovery. It's one of the changes you can make in your studio that is lasting change. It's something that would stick with you forever. I do not think I will ever go back to how I was teaching 5 years ago. This one is what I often encounter. Often encounter. Yeah. This is not my job. I'm not a therapist. I'm a teacher. Oh, I hear this a lot. And the best part was when I did this, when I did my training to be a TBRI practitioner, there were a lot of people there who were not therapists. They were juvenile detention officers. They were teachers. There were some public school teachers, public school administrators, group home, orphanage, foster home. So lots of these people. So we were not therapists. A juvenile detention officer is certainly not a therapist. But being trauma informed is not a job, it's a mindset. And also, healing from trauma is a journey. It takes the people around someone who has experienced trauma to help them heal. So the healing from trauma does not occur in a void or just in a clinician's office. It is actually the everyday interaction that helps the person move forward in their healing. Here's a quick video that I wanted to show you. It talks about toxic stress and the brain and how toxic stress affects the processes in our brain. So I invite you to watch this with me.
As we develop, our brain produces 250,000 neurons every minute. By birth, we'll have 100 billion of these miraculous building blocks. But in order for our brains to fully function, we'll need synaptic connections to organize and build networks. Who we become and how we function depends entirely on how these networks develop, and our interactions with others and how we've been treated determines everything. From functions like heart rate, breathing, and basic emotions, to personality, decision-making, language, social behavior, and voluntary movement. We know that severe or prolonged abuse or neglect derails that building process. Even in the womb, distress and high anxiety in the mother allows cortisol, the stress hormone, to cross the placenta and disrupt development. When the toxic stress response is activated repeatedly, brain development and even immune systems are disrupted. Research has shown that high doses of stress hormones inhibit brain function and impulse control, overbuilding the fear center and the part of the brain that's critical to emotional regulation. TBRI uses 3 sets of principles to begin the healing caused by toxic stress. By recreating the developmental process, TBRI strives to introduce the nurturing that was absent in those toxic situations. And for the child who has endured toxic stress, healing must begin with a sense of both physical and emotional safety, something this child may have never known. Connecting principles are designed to create and nurture healthy relationships through sensitivity, consistency, and availability to disarm fear and gain trust. Giving full attention, using a gentle voice and kind facial expressions and body language are just a few of the ways to help build trust. Punitive and controlling responses only feed a child's mistrust and fear. Empowering principles are designed to meet physical needs, including sensory regulation, nutrition, and hydration, and strive to be aware of environmental issues, such as overstimulation by light, noise, or smells that can trigger behaviors that often leave caretakers baffled. The goal of the correcting principles is to help guide a child through day-to-day strategies by correcting fear-based behaviors and establishing felt safety, helping a child regulate their emotions, tell their stories, and learn through playful engagement. The Adverse Childhood Experiences Study examined the effects of multiple types of abuse in childhood, and the staggering results showed that high doses of childhood adversity affect brain development drastically, leading to addictions, attempts at self-medication, impacted immune systems, chronic inflammation, and autoimmune diseases. The greater the number of traumatic events, the greater the damage. TBRI can help stop this ugly cycle. There is hope for the damaging effects of toxic stress, but it will take dedication, education, and most of all, understanding.
All right. It's a great video to just see, because they pack a lot of information in a 3-minute video. So with talking about toxic stress and the brain, I'm going to show you this slide. Here is the overlap between trauma, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and ADHD. If you see this overlap, so some of the behaviors we as teachers associate with ADHD, it's not really true ADHD. PTSD, childhood PTSD will mimic and overlap some of the symptoms of ADHD. So it's really important, if you are suggesting testing and things like that, that the parents find a clinician, a practitioner who is trauma informed. Not every mental health professional is trauma informed. I even hate to say that, because it's really a whole separate field of study. So when I was growing up, I thought I had ADHD. I, you know, I thought I did. Even in college, I thought I did. But really, it wasn't ADHD. It was PTSD. It was big time PTSD, which I did not realize it was. So you have this, and you can find this on the acesconnection.com. I believe I put that on the notes that you have. So you can go back and refer to this. So I would just encourage teachers to not so quickly label a child. Oh, that child has ADHD. Well, you don't know. You really don't know. And so for me as a practitioner for TBRI, it's the proverbial, the more you know, the more you know you don't know. So when someone asks me, do you think this child has ADHD or PTSD? I would say, I don't know. Yeah. But based on their history, I would say I suspect this. But if I approach it with the trauma informed approach, I can mitigate quite a bit of the, what we feel is ADHD. You can mitigate a lot of that. especially by meeting sensory needs. So in the in the video, they mentioned some of these already: difficult pregnancy, difficult birth, early childhood hospitalization, NICU. I think even adults now, with COVID, just the medical procedures are so difficult. So abuse, any form of abuse, the message that's being sent is, I don't like you, you don't deserve to be liked. Um, and then neglect in any form is, you don't exist, I don't see you, I don't hear you. And other forms of trauma that a child might go through. And this by no means is an exhaustive list. War, natural disasters, losing the parents, um, either divorce, a death of a parent, bullying, poverty. You talk about microaggressions. I was reading on microaggressions yesterday, and I said, what are microaggressions towards children? Have we thought about that? Because that would go into this category as well. I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you, so feel free to uh, go re-listen to the recording and and shoot me questions when you have them. I know this is a lot of information. So if your model of the brain is your hand, I have my thumb in the center of my palm and I close it. This is a great model of the brain. Right in the center is something called the amygdala, and that is your your security alarm. It's always awake. It never goes to sleep. So when my brain is regulated, I hope today it is regulated. So you can see this front part of the brain is where a lot of the cognitive processes are. Now the back side of the brain is where your other, I don't remember the term right now, but controlling your breathing, your endocrine system. But when the brain is calm like this, it feels safe. I can make a connection. I can think. I can learn new things. When the amygdala perceives a threat, now it might not be a real threat. It's going to go, I need to find somewhere safe. Where can I go? Who can help me? So it's going to do that. So when the brain cannot find a safe place, or it feels like it is in immediate danger, it will basically flip. And this model was by Dan Siegel, and his book is in my bibliography and suggested resources. You can also watch his YouTube video on this. So I need to flee or I need to fight. But if nobody helps whoever is in that stage, if nobody, a person does not come in, then it goes to the freeze or collapse. Yeah, so this is like the emotional 911 is happening. So as teachers, we want to keep our students here on the green upper part, on the calm. I feel safe, I can make a connection. You want to keep it there. So what are some of the ways we can do it? And for today's presentation, I'll be talking about connection. Last year's, if you watched my MTNA presentation last year, I spoke on empowerment. I spoke about the physical things you can do to create safety. So the biggest shift from very traditional teaching, how do I now evaluate my lessons? As a type A recovering perfectionist, I used to go, lean towards the right side of this chart. And I found that I cannot sustain that. I just really cannot sustain, you know, every child has to have this many pieces. They got to be doing a contest piece. They got to be doing a memorized piece and sight reading pieces, scales. I can't. It's not sustainable for me. So I began looking at my training and go, how can I shift this, especially when the pandemic hit? So I'm glad a lot of these things were in place in my studio and in my university teaching before the pandemic hit. And when the pandemic hit, guess where I leaned on very quickly? I leaned on the left. Yeah, it was connection. Did I connect with my student today? Did I engage with them today? And what did I do today that built our trust between us even more? How did our relationship grow? If I have these four elements, then the last two elements will just be the train. It is not the caboose. It is not it's not the engine driving this train. The engine that's driving this train is connection, engagement, trust, and relationship. If the engine is that, then all the other train cars are going to be pulling musical concepts, pieces and assignments, um, festivals, you name it, recitals. They all fall in that order. And when you do this, you find that teaching becomes less stressful. So I asked myself, can I sustain this model year to year? Can I sustain this model during the pandemic? Yes, because in the pandemic, with the social isolation, not social distancing, is really social isolation. We, me as a person, I'm looking for connection too. I'm looking for engagement as well. So we can build that. There you go. I can ask my students, hey, can I help you practice with my university students who had to pass piano proficiency? I pared the syllabus down to the bare bones. I told my student, I'm not going to give you extra scales. I'm not going to give you extra pieces. You will do the bare bones. When I see you in person next semester, I'll patch up as much as I can. But right now, we are in survival mode and we need to stay there before we go into freeze mode. That is not what I want. I don't want freeze mode. Yeah. So connection, how do we do this connection business? I wasn't very good at this. My high school friends can tell you I was pretty difficult person, to high maintenance, right? And i I grew out of a lot of that as I walked the journey of being self-aware and being aware of where my biases come from. Yeah, why am I so driven? And I'm still pretty driven today, but with a different set of reasons. Yeah, I was very driven and a perfectionist type A. Why? Because I believed a lie. I believed a lie that if I was not perfect, someone would abuse me. That's a rough way to live. And some students that and some people you encounter, I can almost instantly pick it up that they are being so driven. We might be organizing an event together or putting together a Thanksgiving meal, and this person wants everything to be perfect. The tablecloth has to be squared, and I'd be like, sure, sure, and then I know there's something driving this, and me trying to do anything about this is not going to change it. It probably make it worse. So I just say it's all right. I'm secure enough now with myself that I can go along with it. So awareness of where you are as a teacher. When I start my day now, I do go through a mental checklist. How much sleep have I had? How much food? How much water? Do I need another cup of coffee? Do I need a piece of chocolate? It's okay. Do that. Um, so we're talking about awareness. Playful engagement is another way of connecting. And the last one is attunement. Mhm. So here is the real slide for awareness. I jumped ahead of myself. So the power of observation with your students and you. So I started with, so I have a checklist, yeah, with how when I begin my teaching day. So the more you are aware of yourself, a lot of people think, I used to think if I was focusing on myself, I was being selfish. I that's a horrible mindset. I've learned that if you can take care of yourself, you can take care of other people better. And when you take care of other people better, they take care of you better. So it's a great cycle. Uh, so power of observation. So how do I know a student is, their brains are about, they're about to do this? Yeah. What? Especially in a classroom. One-on-one is pretty easy to do, but in a classroom, like if when I'm the accompanist for a choir, I can basically sit at the piano and scan the choir and go like, that student needs that student needs help right now. So it's power of observation. You look at the pupil dilation, because when people are getting nervous, getting scared or mad, their eyes get bigger. But even before that happens, that's a simple, very simple one, and that's, I hope it's going to help you. If you were to put your finger here right at the end of your jaw, almost, and just grit your teeth, just kind of bite your teeth together. Do you see that pop up? You can feel it pop up. Yeah, that is the first sign somebody's getting uncomfortable. That little tidbit has helped me a lot in teaching class piano, because I can scan the whole classroom, while I ask them to independently practice, and I can zero in on that student needs help. So I will buzz in with my system and scaffold them. Hey, let me play it with you. Let's do it together. And that is regulating. So those are the physical clues of emotional stages, yeah, where they are in this brain. So physiological state, ask your students, when did they last have something to eat or drink? I have a whole separate presentation on that, and that was on empowerment. I asked the student, have you had any water? That was a dumb question. Well, she did. It's 4 p.m. Her lesson was at 4 p.m. The last time she drank water was at recess at 11. So I went like, ask the question differently. So I offered her a cup of water. That lesson went way better. So our own state of attachment, how do we relate to people? So there is secure attachment. That means everything's good. All the ways they relate to people are very good. And that's about 10% of the population in America, roughly. Yeah, 10% secure attachment. They're secure with themselves, they're secure with others. Then the next group is dismissive. The biggest group in America is dismissive attachment. And that's sad to hear, because it's 70%. 70% of the population falls into the dismissive category. And my observation, just my regular observations on the piano teacher forums, confirms that quite a bit. Oftentimes, a teacher posts, I'm having problems with this student, with this family, and a lot of teachers just suggest drop them. And I don't argue with that, but I know when they do that, I was like, dismissive. There you go, dismissive, very quickly. And the other group that's about in the 15%, and I fall into that, is the ambivalence group. And here are the people pleasers. So not quite secure. Yeah. And we can be a combination of these. So I am mostly ambivalent, really very high on that ambivalence score. And there is another end of the spectrum, and that is disorganized. You won't see these people around very much because they are basically have to have help in living their day-to-day lives, and that is the disorganized attachment. So you have that, and that's a low percentage, thankfully. So if you're feeling like really down, oh my gosh, but I have good news for you. There is earned secure. There is another group that can override any of these groups, and that is called earned secure. That means you are aware of your attachment style and you really don't want to stay there. So you're taking steps towards being earned secure. So secure with yourself and secure with others. So I'm on the way to my earned secure status, pushing the ambivalent more and more out of the picture. So autonomy. So be aware that your student's voice matters. It's hard. It was hard for me as an authoritarian background, that what I say you need to do. Okay, that's just the way the world is. And that came from my own trauma history, because nobody heard me. People would not say, would not respect my no. So now I'm making it. So my voice matters, yes, but I can say it differently as a teacher. But at the same time, I invite my student, what are your needs? What do you think? So all these autonomy, just think about ways you can let your students' voices come forward. Okay. Playful engagement is another way you can connect with students, especially during the pandemic. Play disarms fear. When we're playing, the neuroscientists are finding out during play, and it's for all humans, during play the brain is fully regulated. It's one activity other than music that the brain is fully regulated. So music, we have a great advantage because it's one activity that requires the whole brain to function together. But play disarms fear. So do not be, I used to think games in the music lesson was just a waste of time. I don't think that way anymore. So you can redirect behavior with play. One of the ways that I haven't used this, but one of my trainers suggested it, was when a student disobeys you, you ask them to do something and they would not do it, you sing it. You do your opera, you do your operatic arioso voice and you sing it. Yeah. And they said, oh, they will listen. Sing instead of speak. So it engages that play center. And if they want to talk back to you, they sing it back. It was pretty funny to see some of that. Improvisation, composition are also ways of playful engagement. Um, I used to think improvisation, you gotta be like Jeremy Siskin, you guys all know him, I hope. You gotta be a really good jazz pianist to improvise. But it's not, it's discovery at the piano. You can make up anything, but and composition is also another way of giving voice. So both of these activities are playful engagement and giving voice. So I would love to do more and more of these. This is not my natural habitat in the piano world. So I also have to get out of my comfort zone, and the fear of being wrong, the fear of what if it doesn't sound good, right? Those are all fears. Those are all fears. I'm going to propose to you something. I was asked to do a presentation on performance anxiety from the lens of the trauma-informed education. I don't have proof of this, and I'm going to research more. I told the class, a university class, I said, let me propose to you the root issue of performance anxiety is the fear of shame. Fear of being shamed, fear of being found out who you are and what you can do, and you don't measure up. How can we change our music culture, our music education culture? How can we remove shame? And Brené Brown has excellent resources because she studies shame. She's like, I'm a shame researcher. So how can we remove shame in our classroom, in our studios? Games, improv. How do we even do that? So that's a question I am pondering, that's in my head now. Music and movement, you got plenty of resources with that. Clinton Pratt had an awesome sessions of music and movement, and I know the pedagogy track at NTNA also has a lot music moves, Marilyn's music moves. So there's lots of things that you can try. And if you're not comfortable, just hand the kids some scarves, put on some music, do something simple. And it make you happy too. So the other point with connection, I talked about shame. I talked about shame. How can we change our language, of a good job, right? Student plays something, well done, good job, congratulations on a fine performance. So as an adjudicator, I'm making very conscious decisions in my comments to each student that I address the intrinsic worth of a person. So I might say, you were very brave today to play this for me. You know, thank you for putting yourself out there. Thank you for sticking with this, the tenacity. So it's not tied to performance. I don't want to tie it really to their performance and not tie it to their behavior, but I try to aim for character praise. Some of the ones that are simple is, it was so good to be with you today. Your presence was good enough. It was good to see you today. I enjoyed my time with you today. It had nothing to do with how they played, what they did, what they accomplished, but appreciating that time together. You can even say, you're so funny. You're so smart. Those are all character praises. And sometimes we use that word, the phrase good job, way too much. And some students don't even believe that. But if you were to do character praise, they are going to see themselves in a different light. So attunement, this is my last slide. Attunement is something that I try to use a lot. In fact, if you have pets, if you have a dog or a cat, they pick up on this too. So on the front of your head, right here, near your forehead, is where mirror neurons are located in your brain. So they're right here. So I'm gonna tease you. I know it's a very cold morning for everybody because it's 15 degrees in Oklahoma City, and very seldom do we get this 15 degrees. So I'm gonna drink my hot tea. Yeah, drink my hot tea. When I drink it, what do you feel? Coffee drinkers, you can pretend I just took a sip of my coffee. You felt it. You felt it. You know what that sensation feels like. I basically made your mirror neurons fire. So when you see someone yawn in the classroom and you suddenly see everybody yawning in the classroom, well, mirror neurons just kicked in. So when a student's sort of, going down, you can see it going down. The lesson's not going too well. They're not willing to do what you're asking. They haven't practiced. They won't sit still. You can use your mirror neurons. One of the ways is use your mirror neurons. So they can copy your behavior. So when someone's out of control, you stay in control. And that's hard. That's sometimes really hard. Because it takes a while, but those mirror neurons will pick up also on your emotional state. So we talk about this as a co-regulation, brain and body. Mothers and babies, this is a really what I would call what nature designed and intended. And sometimes when this breaks, this is when attunement goes awry. So a mother rocks the baby and she puts the baby close to her chest. Because when a baby hears his or her mother's heartbeat, they are actually regulating. The mother's heartbeat is regulating the baby's heartbeat. the mother's body temperature is regulating the baby's body temperature. It's amazing how that happens, but that is called co-regulation. So that's in a nutshell. We as we grow, we need co-regulators. They need co-regulators until about the age of 14. So we think a teenager does not need a co-regulator. No, they need an adult body to borrow the emotional and physical state, the physiological state of an adult body to regulate to theirs. Mm-hmm. So that's up to the age of 14. That's much higher than we thought. So it was fun when our trainers asked us to guess, and we were all guessing the single digits. And she said, no, it's 14 years old. That's when the brain is finally able to completely self-regulate. 14 years old. So matching behaviors, some of the ways you can affirm your student is match their behaviors. When they choose a sticker for their book, you can go like, hey, you chose my favorite sticker too. Oh, you like the color green? I do too. We're matching behaviors. Sometimes you can sit the way they sit. It's funny. Or talk the way they talk if they will let you, or let them copy you. Let them copy you. One of the things that I really love is rote repertoire. I love it because our eyes are not focused on the book. We're not staring at something. We're listening, we're talking, and we can see each other face to face. There's a whole lot more face-to-face interaction. So they can copy my facial expressions. They can copy my hand gestures. And this is really a perfect attunement exercise in the music studio. So I've talked about music and movement. You move and they copy. Also another way of connecting. So that ends my presentation today. And I do have the recommended resources and my pretty extensive bibliography in the notes for you. So I would just open the time for questions. I know it's a lot. I'm going to stop the share and so I can focus on you. All right. Okay. Is that better? Yes. Okay. All right. I see Gay has a question.
Hi. I'm just would like you to sort of clarify trauma in terms of, can something be considered trauma if it's a recent event and changes the student's behavior, like at a particular lesson? If something, or is it something just from childhood and that's what you're addressing? Or
there are big traumas and there are little traumas. And if an event is significant enough to have an emotional impact on a child, it is trauma. And even on us as adults, I had I'll give you an example. I was hiking in Colorado and my kids were running away from me, and so I had to try to corral them so they wouldn't run into other hikers. But as I was doing that, two other hikers, which actually do not have rights of way because they're coming down and I'm going up, they cussed me out. They cussed me out. I had to process that. After we ended the hike, I went like, that was traumatic. It was. Here you are trying to keep your children safe, right? And you do have rights of way, but someone cussed you out. And I was like, what did I do? Right? So it can be something as simple as that. Yeah.
This is just so relevant, and I'll just share it for a second. But last night I made the decision to not teach a little 9-year-old that I have been teaching in person because he hasn't been vaccinated, and I just trying to stay healthy. I don't have filters cleaned up or in my basement yet, my studio. So when he came to the Zoom lesson, he was very different. And I said, maybe we can meet next week because I'm going to get some more filters. And he said, no, we can't meet because I'm unvaccinated. And the whole lesson just took off from there. And so, I just wondered if he was having a whole issue around not being vaccinated. I know his parents are very conservative about that. And it was just, he was very belligerent and he was not doing what I asked.
Yeah.
It was just a completely different kid. Anyway.
Yes.
That's it.
So when so I'm gonna kind of refer to what I was saying. So what was the need behind that behavior? Right?
Yeah,
He felt
right.
rejected. He felt
Yes.
really, really rejected.
Yeah.
And rejection is so hard in children. It is such a hard thing. And you know what? Bless his parents. Seriously, they're gonna they're gonna bear the brunt of this. And I'm gonna say it from personal. This is my journey right now. And so Amber and Elena, sorry, I was just kind of out of it. When you guys were emailing me, I'd be like real slow. My daughter's best friend ghosted her. I mean, they changed schools, they left, and never said goodbye, nothing. And I didn't know that's what happened. So my child has been having these massive meltdowns. You wouldn't buy this toy for me. Seriously, we've gotten kicked out of restaurants. I had to leave stores. And finally, I talked to my child's therapist. What is going on? And she went like, don't you know? Every week she comes in here and she asks for that friend. I said, that was 6 months ago. It was 7 months ago. But she said every day. So that rejection, and especially with the pandemic, the fear of losing people we love is right in the forefront. Every day. My daughter talks about, I think daddy's gonna die in his sleep. Seriously. I mean, my daughter said that. And I went like, what? How do you address these fears? I really have no good answer. But what I know is I can just work to regulate. I can just go like, honey, I'm still gonna be here. You have new friends. I'm really sorry. It really hurts, and that little boy, when you said that was what he did, it's like, I'm gonna push you away because it feels easier to not feel my pain.
Yeah.
So when you get a student who's very angry, as even the college kids, when you get someone or an adult who is very angry, I'm going to propose to you the underlying feeling is really sadness, is really grief. They're grieving something, and it's so hard to feel that grief. And I was that person, because I didn't even believe it when my child therapist, if you ever recommend or hear of a child therapist, and if they don't do a parent intake questionnaire, a parent interview, it's probably not a good approach. My child's therapist spent 2 hours with me before she would begin seeing. She said, I want to interview you. And I did not know she was taking a trauma history, my trauma history, And at the end, she said, you are a person that has a high, you are like really traumatized. You have a lot of trauma that you have never talked about, never processed. And she said, and I finally said, no wonder I was such an angry person. I was such an angry high schooler, the typical angry. And then when that subsided, I became the fearful high schooler, would not leave my house, and so now as an educator, looking back, as a mom and looking back, I go like, wow, if someone would have known what I was really feeling, perhaps I wouldn't have had to suffer for 40 years before breaking out into the world and going like, I can be loved. You know, if someone yells at me now, you know, if someone cusses me out, I'll be going like, bless you, but you're gonna stop. Yeah, seriously, I don't back down anymore. If they yell at my children for their behavior, I'd be like, thank you for your input, but they have special needs. If you would like to handle it, you're more than welcome.
Yeah.
You know, and we say bye. So it's growing both with compassion. We talk about trauma informed teaching. It's putting up boundaries too. Putting up boundaries. So Gay, I applaud you for putting up boundaries for protecting your health. That's we cannot be so compassionate, which was my problem, being the people pleaser, so compassionate that I let everybody invade these boundaries. And then in the end, I find that, hey, I have nothing else to give. So now you are putting up boundaries for yourself. If you don't have to worry so much about contracting COVID, you're going to stay healthier. That's just a fact.
Yeah.
And I have had students who quit. My best student quit. I was so sad. And then again, when she said, I'm gonna stop piano, and then I told her, I said, you know what? Sure, go explore some other things. But I said, but I know you are so good at piano. I know you're coming back. And she just looked at me and said, yes, I'm coming back, but just not next semester. I said, that's fine. So it's building that. I'm secure enough to go like, yep, you can go explore. But I told her I will always have a spot for you. So I said, I will make sure I, save room for you. And her mom goes like, I'm just waiting for her to say she wants to restart. It's all that we know who we are and that we are happy we're able to love ourselves. Yeah, I think because if I love what Paula, right, said, it seems like it comes down to compassion. Yes, and compassion is not sympathy, but compassion is that empathy. I can step in your shoes and stay with you in these very difficult and I like to say the ugly side of life, because we've been taught hide your anger, hide your sadness, all these not so nice things. And I want and I'm glad my college students knew that they could show me their ugly side and I could take it. Like I could like take it. And I told them, look, I've had a lot of trauma before. Trust me, I can take it. I can sit here and take it. And so it builds that relationship, and I think it builds hope in the other person that even at my worst, you're not going to abandon me, you're not going to punish me, and you are not going to reject me. And so those are the tenets of trauma-informed education. It's like, how do you stay in the mess? How do you stay in the mess and come out yourself? So thank you, Gay.
Yeah, thank
Any other
you.
questions? Oh, thank you, Beatrice. Have a wonderful day. Yeah. So, just hi, Megan.
Hi. My question, I haven't quite found the words for it yet.
Okay.
Maybe I can
just shoot it. Yeah.
I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you. This is some stuff that I think about, and I also think about it in terms of like what schools are like and what is expected of kids. And I find I kind of get caught up sometimes on like I all these connection things, but as piano teachers, we're still like trying to get a thing done, and we're looking at compliance so that we can get the thing done. And again, I don't know what the question exactly is. I'm like, can you even have someone at a high level of piano playing as a child and it not be controlled or getting compliance from the child? Trauma, yeah, it just like, I'm not sure if they can coexist.
They can, they absolutely can. And there is a conference that happens every year, almost the same time as MTNA. Last year it was overlapping. So I was on two screens, you know, trying to follow MTNA and trying to follow the other one. Now, the fun part about Bright and Quirky, I'm going to write that here. It's an awesome conference.
And also how you get parents on board.
That will be a whole separate presentation. But I think, you know, I'm going to mention Bright and Quirky because you talk about a student who plays really, really well. Yeah, they are high level performing students. But then on the other end, like behavior wise, emotionally, that's a lot that needs to be, you know, worked on. And it's actually not uncommon. They call it the 2E, two exceptionalities. So 2E children, that's what they, in that world, they call them. So two exceptionalities, I'll put it here. That means they score very high on the intelligence scale, you know, intelligence, creativity, really, really high. And then on the other scale of emotional regulation, yeah, they're also really high on the other end of that scale. So they got this U-shaped graph. And that conference deals with children like that. Excellent. Some of the authors that I study and read, Stephen Porges, they speak on that one, Dan Siegel. And the best part is the conference is free if you watch the day it broadcasts. That's why I was doing both with MTNA. I was just like, okay, my friend's presenting at MTNA. I really want to be there live. But this one is only free the day off. So Bright and Quirky conference, it's awesome. It's the top experts in trauma, managing trauma-informed education, dealing with children with ADHD, dealing children with sensory processing issues. In schools, what are you looking for? So as a parent, I was very happy during the pandemic. I found out that my school district, the school district we were in, prior to that, the same year I got my certification was the same year the district decided to implement trauma-informed training district-wide. Of course, you know, their training is not as intensive as what I did, but at least they had some tools. So when the pandemic happened, I loved it. Homework became somewhat optional. So, you know, the teacher would send like 16 pages on the letter E. I almost screamed. Seriously, on one alphabet, you have 16 pages of homework for a 6-year-old. And bye, Paula. And I talked to my child's teacher, and she said, send one. Submit one page. She said when you submit one page, I can just check the box, done. So that's part of that. And they do conscious discipline, and that's another style. So these are things you can be looking at. I believe as a whole, our country as a whole is moving towards a nationwide trauma-informed education rollout. You have to. There's just no way, you know. You know, I hate hearing people say, "Oh, kids nowadays." And at any time I'm in a conversation with other people or with teachers, when I hear the word kids nowadays, you know what I say? I actually speak up now. I don't shut up anymore. I said kids nowadays are facing greater stresses than you and I have ever imagined. Ever. I said I cannot imagine a more stressful time for children than now. I said the pressures of social media, the pandemic, the social isolation, parents both having to work and working from home. I said they're surrounded by this pressure cooker. And I say, you know what? They do, yeah, climate crisis, yeah, weather phenomenons. And over here in Oklahoma, we have tornado season, so we're actually preparing because the weather fluctuations are so bad. Because we can have a tornado during the day and an ice storm at night. So we basically get it quickly. So I talk about that because I want to point this out that they don't think about it. And yeah, yes. See, those are pressures, nuclear bomb, the threat of war. Like my parents grew up at the end of the Japanese occupation in Malaysia. Horror stories, horror. I just can't imagine, what that was like. And so when you have all these, so when I present to college students, my first sentence out of my mouth very quickly in the presentation is, I'm sorry you've been labeled as snowflakes. I am sorry that label has come up, because as trauma-informed educators, we know that is not right. Not right at all. You're dealing with so much, that you are just pushing back. You're just pushing back. You just don't want to deal with all this stuff. So you're being called a snowflake. In fact, their generation has learned to use their voice, but you have another generation who's mostly dismissive. So here's the clash. Mm-hmm. So we're coming in doing this. So I hope the presentation was helpful in starting, in thinking. And I know many of you are ahead of me in your teaching experience and mothering experience and parenting. So I really appreciate this opportunity to speak with all of you.
Well, thank you, Gloria. Our time, I think, is up for today.
Yes.
I thoroughly was very impacted by your talk. It's almost, brings tears to my eyes, half of the things that you said. Just reflections on my, being a mother and a teacher and the responsibility of being a human in general, and actually knowing people around me and being the best that I can be for myself and for them. So we had your handout sent to everybody, our general membership, so they have it. And I put it in the chat today, and I will put the video on YouTube if that's okay. We just share it with our membership,
yes.
People who can
Send
attend.
me a link. Yeah,
we'll do so. Thank you all so much for attending. Thank you so much, Gloria and Amber, for working it all out in times and all that stuff. Really appreciate it. And we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Gloria. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.